Hello everybody, this is Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute Histories videos. And today we're going to talk about duckpin bowling, but I have to start with a little bit of an explanation. If you're looking at me and thinking, Johns, it looks like you are holding a makeshift microphone made out of baling wire and nylon pantyhose, you are right. It is so windy out here today in East Baltimore, I'm on Eastern Avenue, that my tiny little lapel mic was just not cutting it. And after about 6 tries, 6 fails, I was about to give up in defeat when my neighbor Saul across the street came up with this brilliant and affordable suggestion. So let's hope it works. As the saying goes, the show must go on. So today we're going to talk about duckpin bowling. Say a quick thanks to a gentleman named Michael for suggesting the topic. And if we do the game free association and I say the words duckpin bowling, I bet many of you out there, the first thing that will pop into your head is Baltimore. Just like if I said Natty Boh beer or crab cakes or formstone. All of those I bet would elicit Baltimore also. And duckpin bowling is associated with Baltimore to a great extent. For those of us who are uninitiated, duckpin bowling is like regular 10-pin bowling, but everything is smaller. The ball is smaller, the pins are smaller, the lane is smaller, but smaller does not mean easier. If you're a pretty decent 10-pin bowler, there's a good chance that you've bowled a perfect game or close to it, and reportedly there has never been a perfect game bowled in duck pins. So in this case, smaller is in no way easier. So duckpin is a sort of quintessential Baltimore sport, but hold your ears, some of you. It may have been invented in Baltimore, but it also may not have been invented in Baltimore. The prevailing story goes that it was invented by 2 former Baltimore Orioles baseball players, John McGraw, and let me make sure I get the other gentleman's name right, Wilbert Robinson. McGraw and Robinson were part of the Orioles team in the 1880s and 1890s, and that's when the Orioles were here before they left, and then they obviously came back. But they were part of the National League winning team in 1894 and 1895 and 1896, I believe those 3 years, and they got a bonus for doing so well. These 2 gentlemen pooled their resources and bought a bar downtown Baltimore called appropriately the Diamond. And they served beer and hard-boiled eggs and, of course, crab cakes. And they installed a bowling alley in about 1898, a regular 10-pin bowling alley. And it did well in the winter, but in the summer, nobody was using it. And when they asked around why, they determined that with that big, heavy ball, bowling in the summer was just too hot. In a Baltimore summer, it was just too hot to bowl. So they got an idea. They took their pins down to a local carpenter and had them shaved down. They found some smaller balls, and they set up some smaller alleys in their bar. And lo and behold, that summer, flocks of people came to do duckpin bowling. With the smaller ball, apparently you could bowl, and the cold beer was enough to keep you cool all summer long. The name came from Robinson. He was apparently an avid duck hunter, and he was duck hunting, so the story goes, one day in the Chesapeake Bay, and turned to his hunting partner and said, look, when I shoot at those geese, they scatter all over the place, just like my little flock of pins back in Baltimore. And from there came the name duckpin bowling that stuck. So we know that that's true. Robinson and McGraw did have a bar. They did start duckpin bowling. And shortly after that, in the early 1900s, it took off in Baltimore. But the pesky historians have done some digging. And it turns out there are references to duckpin bowling a few years before Robinson and McGraw in New Haven, Connecticut, and Lowell, Massachusetts. None other than the preeminent Boston Globe ran a series, I believe in 1894, about a bowling fever that was taking over Boston at the time, and they specifically mentioned duckpin bowling. So maybe McGraw and Robinson were oblivious to what was going on in New England and invented it all by themselves here, or maybe they heard there was some small pin bowling going on and they kind of reinvented it here. But regardless, it took off in Baltimore. The first league, duckpin league, was here in Baltimore in 1903, I believe. followed a year later by one in Washington, D.C. By 1927, there were duckpin bowling alleys all over the place, including the Patterson Bowling Center behind me here on Eastern Avenue. It was started in 1927 and is still going strong. You can still come down here and play when there's no COVID, I guess. By 1928, a national organization formed, the National Duckpin Bowling Congress. And I love the word Congress. That is totally appropriate for duckpin bowling. They standardized the sport. Apparently, people were shaving down bowling pins all over the place, and there was no standard size for pins or balls or anything. So they standardized the sport. In 1938, there were 200,000 players across the country. In 1968, there were 300,000 players. So really took off. There are not that many today. I believe there are only 40 duckpin bowling lanes left in the country. Here, of course, the Patterson. If you go to Cleveland, you can go to the High and Dry duckpin bowling lane. And back up to New Haven, you could go to, I believe it's called the Woodbury bowling lane back up there. But today it is still, the sport is still going strong. One of the challenges, though, for duckpin bowling lane owners is that the machines that reset the pins were invented in early 1950s, I believe by a submarine engineer, and they involve no fewer than 1,000 moving parts, so quite complicated. And if one of those parts breaks, they're not making the machines anymore, so if one of those parts breaks, you've got to cannibalize from one of your other machines, or you've got to find somebody else with another bowling alley who's willing to sell you the part that you need. I'm going to wrap up and say that since 1928, the Duckpin Bowling Congress has bestowed the honor of a national champion on somebody. Think of it sort of as like the Stanley Cup of duckpin bowling. There's a wonderful glass bowling pin I think you get if you're the national champion. And for many, many years, we've had a men's champion and a women's champion. So I want to say congratulations, and with the congratulations, the current champions, and let me make sure I get their names right, Mark Klingenhofer and Jill Manns are the current reigning national duckpin bowling champions. And to bring it back, and so if you're Mark or Jill and this video gets to you, a sincere congratulations from all of us in Baltimore Heritage. Let me bring it back to whether duckpin bowling is a quintessentially Baltimore sport. I will note that the current national champions, Mark and Jill, neither of them are from Baltimore. Mark is from Essex and Jill is from Mount Airy. So I think in the end, we in the greater Baltimore area can still lay claim to duckpin being a quintessentially Baltimore sport. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.